The Chamber works closely with embassies, high commissions, and offices of the consular corps and frequently organize uh, interactive sessions addressed by envoys representing India's important trade partners. In this context, we have organized a few programs with the Consulate of Australia in Kolkata as well. It is indeed a matter of great encouragement that following the conclusion of a preliminary free trade agreement last year, India and Australia have started discussions to take bilateral ties to greater heights. The seventh round of talks regarding a comprehensive deal has concluded in October, and both the countries agreed to pursue negotiations on 5 tracks and 14 new areas, including digital trade, government procurement, MSMEs, traditional knowledge, sports, environment, innovations, space, labor, and competition policy. In the short term, considering the rising importance of India in the Indo-Pacific region, Australia has released its India Economic Strategy 2035, in which it has been projected that by 2030, there will be over 850 million internet users in India, and by 2035, India's 5 largest cities will have economies of comparable size to middle-income countries of today. Since there is no market over the next 20 years which offers more growth opportunities for Australian business than India, Australia is focused to lift India on its top 3 export markets by 2035 and make it to the 3rd largest destination in Asia for Australian outward investments. In 2022, India was Australia's 6th largest trading partner with two-way trade in goods and services valued at 46.5 billion US dollars. Last year, Australia and India have signed the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, ECTA, on 2nd April 2022, and Australia has already become India's 10th top export destination during the April-October 2023. According to the official data of the Union Commerce Ministry, India's exports to Australia jumped 17% year on year to 4.9 billion US dollars in the first 6 months of financial year 24, while imports fell by 24.6% to 8.3 billion US dollars. Further to the ECTA, India and Australia are also looking to enhance the scope of trade, and there seems to be a huge scope for increased cooperation in a number of areas such as critical minerals, digital space, and sustainability in comprehensive economic cooperation agreement, which is under negotiation. In this regard, a few months back, our Union Minister of Commerce and Industry, Shri Piyush Goyal, and his Australian counterpart, Mr. Don Farrell, have observed in a joint statement that India and Australia must aim to increase bilateral trade to US $100 billion annually. Although this could appear to be optimistic, considering that the authorities mean it and have already initiated tariff reduction on several items, I foresee a lot of expansion of opportunities in bilateral trade. There could, however, be some areas of concern. The geopolitical relationship between Australia and China could be a factor, while the coal imports from Australia have helped India meet its domestic energy requirements. Fossil fuels will remain contentious, particularly. As global pressure to address climate change is gathering pace, it is therefore not clear to what extent coal will remain an important component of bilateral economic partnership. I would request Ambassador Dasgupta to kindly share his thoughts with us on how the two agreements, ECTA and CECA, are expected to facilitate bilateral trade and the sectors in which Australia is expected to make major investments in our country. However, despite the impressive figures indicated on incidents of robust bilateral trade, not much could be deciphered regarding the other countries of Oceania. I would request Ambassador Dasgupta to also elucidate on the economic perspectives of the island countries in Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia, and outline their prospects of trade and investments with India. With respect to the current geopolitical scenario, existing in the Indo-Pacific region, I would request Ambassador Dasgupta to provide us with a few sector-specific policy suggestions that we need to implement to deepen the roots of West Bengal in Australian soil. Sir, it would be highly beneficial if you will kindly extend your support to the Chamber in formulating a strategy document of a long-term Australia strategy for us, highlighting significant sectors requiring structural reforms. The Chamber would share the document with the concerned authorities in our state as well as the Government of India for their consideration. I would take this opportunity to seek Ambassador Dasgupta's views on the developments that we can expect from Quadrilateral Security Dialogue QSD or the Quad, the informal strategic forum comprising the four nations US, India, Australia, and Japan. One of the primary objectives of the Quad is to work for a free, open, prosperous, and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. Last but not the least, Australian-India relationship has moved well beyond the narratives of mutual fondness for the three C's: Commonwealth, commerce, and cricket. In addition to forging a comprehensive bilateral relationship with the main focus on a sturdy economic, strategic, and security partnership, bilateral T20 cricket series is also expected to yield a lot of commerce. So cricket could be a facilitating catalyst for bilateral trade. With these words, I conclude my address, and before inviting Mr. Vikram Tatia to introduce our guest in chief, we have had the privilege of having Her Excellency Rowan Ainsworth, Consul General of Australia in Kolkata, and it will be nice if you could set the ball in motion before we move to Ambassador Dasgupta. And we appreciate your having taken out time in spite of your prior commitment after this meeting to address us.
My absolute pleasure. I wouldn't have missed it for anything. And set the ball rolling. Is that another cricket analogy you're giving to me here? I agree. There's nothing wrong with a bit of cricket in our trading relationship as well. And I understand that Kookaburra has one of their factories here producing cricket balls. So there we go. There is plenty of room for trade in cricket. So I just want to set the context a little bit for this discussion, because happily, when I come and address chambers of commerce or any organisation, I am able to start by saying that the relationship between Australia and India has never been better than it is today. And every time I say that, it's true again, because our relationship is literally increasing, strengthening day by day. There's so many different aspects to the relationship now. There's so much happening in the relationship between Australia and India. And trade, of course, is one very large and very important part of that relationship. And as you mentioned, we have a new free trade agreement. It just started at the very end of last year. So it's been operating for less than 1 year now, but close to 1 year. And I think there's been huge benefits on both sides as a result of ECTA, the Economic Trade and Cooperation Agreement. We call it ECTA. For example, I love to see a nice circular story. India dropped tariffs for Australian cotton and greasy wool. So that's coming in to India now as an input for your industry, duty-free. And in what is probably not an unrelated result, exports of Indian textiles to Australia have grown by 20%. Now, I'm not saying it's exactly the same thing, but you can see how that lovely circular trading relationship, commercial relationship can occur, because Australia has lots of primary produce like cottons and greasy wool, like critical minerals, for example, for the battery industry, but we don't have a big manufacturing industry in Australia, and India does. India has the skills and the capacity to provide the transformation of produce from Australia and products from Australia. So that's the lovely complementarity we have in our relationship. I'll probably just leave it there because I am very interested to get on to hear what Ambassador Dasgupta has to say. So if I can hand over to you, sir. Hand back to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for your 2 words, I would say, Your Excellency. So let's have a brief introduction of the ambassador from Mr. Vikram Tatia.
Good evening. Ambassador Dasgupta, members of the Chamber, guests and friends. It is my most pleasant duty to introduce our guest-in-chief, Ambassador Amit Dasgupta, AM, IFS, retired, Distinguished Fellow, Australia-India Institute, at today's special session entitled Trade and Investment Prospects between India and Australia, Oceania. An academically brilliant student, Ambassador Dasgupta has been an alumnus of the reputable institution like St. Xavier's College, Kolkata, and Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. Armed with a Master's in Sociology, Ambassador Dasgupta went on to bag the prestigious Commonwealth Fellowship and had a brief stint at the McGill University, Canada. He also completed an executive development program from the Indian School of Business, Hyderabad. Ambassador Dasgupta joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1979 and served in various capacities in India and abroad, such as Cairo, Brussels, Kathmandu, Berlin, Sydney, and Manila. He was the ambassador to the Philippines with concurrent accreditation to the republics of Palau and the Marshall Islands and the Federation States of Micronesia. During his tenure as the Consul General of India in Sydney, Ambassador Dasgupta played a vital role in normalizing our bilateral relations that were soured following the racial attacks on Indian students. He was instrumental in setting up the Australia-India Youth Dialogue and in preparing the concept note for the establishment of the Australia-India Institute. Last year, honoring his contributions in strengthening India-Australia relations, the Government of Australia appointed him as an honorary member in the General Division of the Order of Australia, AM. Ambassador Dasgupta is the 3rd Indian recipient. I have to correct, it's the 4th Indian recipient of this honor next to late Soli Sorabji, an eminent jurist, and Sachin Tendulkar, and now Ratan Tata. He has also been awarded with a gold medal by the Government of New South Wales for promoting multiculturalism and harmony in the region. Ambassador Dasgupta frequently contributes to academic journals, civil society magazines, and newspapers on matters related to foreign policy, management, and leadership, and on education and government policy. He regularly visits academic institutions and mentors students on these subjects. An acclaimed author, Ambassador Dasgupta has written several bestsellers on topics ranging from diplomacy to fiction. Ambassador Dasgupta is currently a Distinguished Fellow of the Australia-India Institute in Melbourne and a member of the Society for Policy Studies, called SPS, a New Delhi-based think tank. I'm certain that following Ambassador Dasgupta's enlightening address at this session, the members of the Chamber would be well acquainted with Oceania, comprising 10,000 small islands and their economic prospects of doing business with India. With these words, I conclude my speech and I request Ambassador Dasgupta to kindly commence his address. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Pasija ji and Vikram for this introduction. I was almost feeling that I was listening about someone else. And often these also sound like obituaries, but I do hope that I would also like to acknowledge the presence with great respect of the Consul General of Australia, Her Excellency Rowan Atkinson, whom I had the great honor and privilege of meeting yesterday. The fact that so many members of the Chamber are here Please accept my deep gratitude for this. Normally in a discussion with the chamber, what I prefer to do, and correct me if you'd like me to change the way I speak, but what I thought I would do is to break up my discussions with you into two parts. One is that I do an overall generic presentation to you on how I think Australia and relations with Australia would be beneficial to industry. And also place this relationship in a context. The second part could be, because each of the members might have specific areas of interest, if you asked me questions, I would go into more detail with them. So, for example, some of you might have an interest in the area of cybersecurity. Someone else might be more interested in textiles. Someone else on higher education. Now, all of this becomes very difficult to actually capture in a talk. But since the president the chair mentioned that you would like inputs to prepare a strategic paper, what we could do is to look at all the different sectors in that paper, because that is an easier thing to do. So if you accept this broad template with regard to what I could say today, then I'd proceed along those lines. Would that be all right?
Yes.
Okay. So I believe that a good starting point would be a talk given by the Australian High Commissioner, His Excellency Philip Green, just earlier this week. And what he tried to do was, he said that, this bilateral relationship, Australia and India, is something that people spoke about for many years as having potential and promise. But it was something that wasn't realized for a long time. And then I recall that when Prime Minister Modi visited Australia earlier this year, there was an article that had the title, "A Relationship Whose Time Has Come." And that title was, as you know, the words were actually drawn from a Charles Dickens book. But I think it did capture very succinctly what is actually happening. And I know this for a fact, and many of you would agree with me, that this is a relationship that has taken off finally, in my view, after the first visit of Prime Minister Modi in 2014, with a sense of depth and intensity that no bilateral relationship has seen over the past 10 years. It is a very rapidly growing relationship based on credible possibilities. And so what High Commissioner Philip Green said, that during the tenure that he's here, as tasked by his Prime Minister, he wanted to place a relationship in a context. And he identified 3 pillars, which would be the basis of a robust relationship. The first is necessity. The second is opportunity. And the third is affinity. And he said, when you look at the relationship between India and Australia, all these 3 boxes are ticked. Now, I leave this with you as a thought, and I will come back to it. Now, when you have a bilateral relationship, and a couple of days ago, I had the great opportunity of meeting with a number of people from military intelligence and discussing with them. You see, you can have a bilateral relationship with, let's say, Bhutan or Nepal or Somalia or Sudan or Egypt or whatever. But there is a relationship which starts evolving and co-opting an entirely new dimension when you see that relationship within a context. Now, the context that I'm referring to right now is the Indo-Pacific. So it is not just a relationship between India and Australia, but a relationship that both Canberra and New Delhi have in the context of the Indo-Pacific. And I think that's very important for us to recognize, because that constitutes the basis of the necessity behind New Delhi and Canberra working together. The second is the opportunity. And here I would like to say that over the many years in the Foreign Service, and even when I was Consul General in Sydney, whenever I met business delegations, including APEX delegations, the common phrase that they would normally use is that A, Australia is very far away. And the second was, it only has a population of 22 million people, and therefore it's a very small market. Now, factually, I don't think Australia is very far away. But yes, I mean, you know, it had 22, now it, I think, has a little more than 24 million people. Sorry? 26 million people. And some other countries have, the European Union is several times more. But please recognize that we are talking about an economy which is resilient and strong enough, with a customer base which is actually looking at high-value products. The reason why I mention this is because the very first step towards a successful ECTA or a successful SICA is the improved literacy that we have among business communities of both sides. I personally believe, and I'm willing to be corrected. I believe that the Indian business community still does not know the Australian market or the Australian customer. And that's because it has never been seen as a priority. And homework or strategic thinking has not gone into this. But this is not a criticism only of the Indian business community. The Australian business community likewise lacks the kind of depth and intensity that actually makes for a robust bilateral trade and investment relationship. But today, I think we have a template. The very fact that so many of you have come to attend this session would suggest that there is an interest among the business community in order to be able to explore new markets and to be able to identify new partners. Because at the end of the day, governments do what governments need to do. It's only business that does business. And what I'm hoping in the course of my discussion is to be able to suggest to you the opportunities that the Australian market offers, including the Pacific Island countries, where I think, you know, you will recall that in 2014, Prime Minister Modi visited Fiji. And in this year, he visited Papua New Guinea. And it is important. Thanks, Ron. Yeah. No worries, but thanks for coming. Yeah. But I think it's extremely important and very, very critical for us to appreciate that in certain areas, in certain countries, our interventions can be joint. I mean, India and Australia can combine resources in order to intervene at Papua New Guinea, which is actually next door to Australia. It's not next door to India. You know, it has a large diasporic population in Fiji. which is a strong affinity for India, but it is physically next door to Australia. And if we were to actually join hands, and I know the Pacific Island countries reasonably well, if we were to actually join hands, we would be able to make the kind of strategic thinking and input which is very important. Let me leave another thought with you. I do not see the role of business and industry just doing business, because that's how you would see it. But as a strategist, I see the doing business that you're doing as part of India's strategic thinking. I'll give you an example. If you do business with Fiji, if you do business with Papua New Guinea, you will actually strengthen the requirements, the perspective that the governments of India have, and most certainly the government of Australia, New Zealand, and the others have, on how the Pacific Island countries ought to be dealt with. Let me give you one of the most devastating examples of the PIC, Pacific Island countries. Do you know that one of the islands, because of a lack of concerted thinking by both Australia and by New Zealand, that island has almost totally been bought off by China? It's called Solomon Islands. Now, the Solomon Islands was ignored by countries for such a long time that it has fallen totally into the China lap. So when you do business and industry, you are actually servicing, without knowing, you're actually servicing a critical strategic intervention that nations make. You're not part of that, but you are an extraordinary input in what has happened or what can happen. And if any of you are interested in what are the challenges, what are the opportunities in the PIC, as the chair mentioned, I'm very happy to get into this. The next item, I would say, is that what we discussed briefly and privately is that it is important for this chamber, because it is largely, it has a very large membership of SME sector. It is important to recognize what would be the best way to make an intervention. The Australian SME is singularly larger than the Indian SME by simple law. You know, the Wilton capital is much more than the Indian SMEs. So who do you actually deal with? Now, this is something which is not difficult for us to identify and actually to be able to put down. Most certainly, in order to know Australia, you have to visit Australia, right? And when you visit Australia, you have to be able to interact with counterparts from Australia. Now, this is where the consulate comes in, and you're blessed because you physically have a consulate in Kolkata. You have people like Ambassador Shorbojit, you have people like me, who are very happy to be able to provide to you the required inputs. I still deal with Australia on a regular basis as part of my job, and connect you with the right business organizations and counterparts based in Sydney, Melbourne, and elsewhere. The third and final point I'll make, and then take questions on an extensive basis. You see, when we look at a market, and I'm making a general comment, when we look at a market, the objective is to be able to figure out how we sell. To a large extent, industry from business from Kolkata, from West Bengal, from Northeast India has hardly penetrated the Australian market. If it has, I'm completely unaware of it. I have never, during the entire 3.5-year period that I was Consul General, ever seen a delegation from Kolkata. I've never seen. There were delegations. There is only one Australia specific chamber. It's called India-Australia Chamber of Commerce. It was based in Chennai, probably still is based in Chennai. And most of the delegation members came for holidays. And they would want to know, can we climb the harbor bridge? How much does it cost? Can we get a discount? But they had hardly any structured discussions with counterparts. As a net result, the whole visit had zero takeaways business-wise. They may have had a lot of takeaways otherwise, it's a great holiday. I think it's a great place to go for a holiday. Expensive, but it's a great place. I think, therefore, it's important for us to first identify what is it we specifically want. Where does our expertise lie? Where does what is it we want to sell? What is it we want to buy? And then take the next step. Let me mention some of the key areas in which Australia would be keen. One is the recent, and this is a point that the chair raised, and I think it's a very valid, important point. The Australian Consul General is not here. She should also be asked about it, which is coal. Coal constitutes the bulk of our imports in the current trade basket, right? We know, as a result of the climate change discussions and the final document, in which the word phase out has not been used, but there has been a general acceptance that we will start embracing other kinds of technology in order to produce energy. My reading of this is that Australia will continue to sell coal, and that if Australia continues to sell coal, which they will, India will continue to buy. And that's going to happen, right? And so I am currently not scared that the coal imports from Australia will fall. I believe it will continue. At the same time, I think there will be significant global pressure for us to move into renewables. And when we move into renewables, it is important for us to recognize that whether it is solar, whether it is water, the multiple areas of renewables, the Australians also have great expertise. I don't know if any of you know, and I'll leave this as a fact. You can Google it. A solar panel anywhere in the world, has 60% patented technology from the University of New South Wales, which has as one of the professors, Professor Martin Green, who is known as the father of photovoltaics. The current research and work that is going on is the improvement of the lifespan and to reduce the weight and the size of the battery, right? Now, if there's anyone in this group that's working on solar, that's the place to go. That's the point of contact. If you think in terms of one of the big problems that West Bengal has, and many other parts of India has, and neighbors have. You talked about Bangladesh. Bangladesh has a serious problem. So does Sri Lanka. Arsenic poisoning in water. Now, the UNSW, which is University of New South Wales, houses the Global Water Institute. One of the primary things that they focus on is water purification. And these are, again, areas that you can get into. Have you heard of a lady called Veena Sahajwala? Veena Sahajwala did her studied at IIT Bombay, then went to the US, did her PhD. She's known as the woman who collects garbage, right? So you and I throw garbage, including electronic waste. She collects it. If you Google her, you will find out. She's a professor at UNSW. She makes garbage into steel. And buildings in Singapore use that technology, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the work that is placed before a delegation prior to its visit to a country requires significant amount of input that could actually help you benefit and have more takeaways than otherwise. Textiles. I mean, the last set of delegations that came to Sydney, and I spoke with the gentleman who I mean, quite a few gentlemen who were selling textiles. They said this did not sell in the European market, and so we brought it to the Australian market to sell it. It doesn't work like that. It simply doesn't work like that. You can either target the very cheap products that the Indian diaspora will purchase, or you can target high value products which the Australian market is looking for. And I believe, therefore, that it is critically important that we have this conversation where you guide me that this is the subject, this is my business area of interest. Can I take this forward? There are two areas currently identified as very critical: cybersecurity, artificial intelligence in the service sector. Service sector also has the entire range of financial services. By the way, a chartered accountant from India can work in Australia if he does a bridging program. That was something I started when I was Consul General. And the other very strong vertical that is available is defense. And there's a lot of discussions that are going on. Linked to this is a whole series of areas that, textiles is very critical, education services, work in hotels, the Australians are very keen on ethical textiles. So everything, if you can demonstrate that it is going to impact along the following lines, they are extremely keen. And most Australians are far more open to India than Indians realize. Also, please remember one thing: never fall in the trap. Even if diplomats and others say it, do not fall into the trap of saying that Australia feels India will replace China. Let me tell you, at the time when India-Australia trade was $25 billion, Australia-China trade was $250 billion. Please also recognize that the second most widely spoken language in Australia is Mandarin. It is not Hindi or Telugu or Bangla or anything. It's Mandarin. They speak it. It is a relationship that they have invested for decades. They are now being told India is a critical partner. They are now willing to look at India as a critical partner, but are getting scared because there is no ease of doing business in their view. Australians are very straightforward people, very, very straightforward people. If you say something, they'll believe you. And so if we are looking at West Bengal, which is very close to my heart, that we do something here. So if we are looking at a delegation from West Bengal and you want to do business, a lot of other parameters need to fall into place, right? Because it's not just controlled by Delhi. It'll be controlled by Delhi, it'll be controlled by the state government. You need, and what's the benefit? You have the Consul General here, you have Austrade here. And if you constitute your own chamber chapter on Australia, between Sharbojit and myself, we'll link you up with the apex chambers in Australia. So I'll stop here for the time being to say one line, which is, I believe in the relationship. I believe that there is potential. I believe that there is promise, but you have to change mindsets. One mindset is that you have to change that it's a small market of 26 million people. It doesn't work. It is 26 million people, but they can buy far more than many other countries. Number two, they will not purchase what you put across to them because it didn't work in some other market. You have to understand that market. And the third thing I don't accept is the Australian view that India is a difficult market to deal with. It is not. It is not. There is a lack of understanding from both sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Dasgupta, for a very encouraging and informative address. Big takeaways is the fact that Indians and Australia, people to people looks like to be more friend, but not that we know of their business and their business opportunities there, and vice versa. They don't know about us, and that's the opportunity which the ecosystem in which people, an organization like Bharat Chamber is there, can actually add value. So thank you very much for this pretty informative talk. Before I open up the floor for questions from the members, just one more. You mentioned very well about what can Australia be looking at in terms of business opportunities with India. What could be the opportunities with Oceania? One, you mentioned that collaborate with Australians to reach out to them. That's one. But then, if products and services, anything that you can highlight.
Yeah, I think, there's some material. I think some of my articles are there on the net. But, the unfortunate part is that the Pacific Island countries are extremely poor. Extremely poor. They are very backward. They operate on a great sense of fear. They really are on the back foot with climate change. When I used to go to Maldives, because I drafted the SAFTA treaty with between the SAARC countries, and I remember whenever I visited Maldives, they felt that they would not physically exist with the levels of with the ice melting, the snow melting, water levels rising, that they would disappear. This is the same fear, and I used to think it was a joke. This is the same fear that every one of the Pacific Island countries face. So when I used to visit Marshall Islands, I used to find islands were there in the morning, were there in the early morning. They were there. At night they would disappear, and they had people there, people who lived there. So they would actually leave the island and migrate to another island, come back to their home, which would be underwater. What are the opportunities there? You name it, they need it. From education to health to infrastructure, everything, the entire gamut is what they need. And but most of the island states, if you looked at food, do you know the only thing that's available to them is something you find in some supermarkets in India? It's so disgusting, no one eats it. It's called spam. You know what is spam? It's a processed meat. And that's the only thing that's available in Marshall Islands and in Micronesia, and everyone eats it. So when you look, if you talk about opportunities of the Pacific Island countries, it is anything you write on a piece of paper, anything you write. Now, what is it that we are talking about on a trilateral basis? What we are talking about on trilateral basis is essential in areas like upgrading skills, looking at building infrastructure, building a health infrastructure. I've just spoken with people at the All India Institute of Hygiene and Public Health today, earlier in the morning. And these are the things that they're looking at. Community health problems that they have, education. There are very few schools available. There are no teachers because the teachers are not educated. So if you want the list of items, water, the production of water, they only drink bottled water and they can't afford it. They cannot afford it. What do you get from them? Fish in large quantities for export. But a country which is poor is also open to corruption, huge amount of corruption. Solomon Islands, the Taiwanese will tell you that the reason why the Chinese were able to purchase Solomon Islands was that they bought the entire political leadership. So I think there are issues, there are problems. Fiji doesn't have that problem. Marshall Islands doesn't have that problem. Nor does Palau or Micronesia or Papua New Guinea. It is possible to intervene there. Automotive components, most certainly. But are the amounts large? No, the amounts are small. Because there aren't that many cars available in Papua New Guinea. But there are sufficient business availabilities and opportunities in Fiji. Because Fiji is the common destination for all Australians and New Zealanders. If they want to go for a holiday, they go to Fiji. Every Australian has been to Fiji. Right? So I think what you look at is leaving one thought. You are not just a chamber and a group of businessmen. You are not. Whatever you do, whether you like it or not, you have contributed significantly to India's strategy and policies in global affairs. Because no country can afford to break a relationship which is bound by trade. Do you think the Americans will break their relationship with Beijing? I mean, is it possible? Not possible. It's not possible. Why is Australia distancing itself from China? Because China has done, and I'm saying something which we follow Chatham House rules, China has done something in Australia which the Australian public does not like. It is trying to influence elections. The public doesn't like this. It is buying up Australian property. Chinese own it. It has locked Australian business in such a manner that no other markets have been explored by the Australians. Now they're realizing they have to move away. It's now. And the two-way trade is in favor of China, not in favor of Australia. Yeah. Okay.
Members, if anybody would be keen on asking any questions to the ambassador, please come forward. Any questions? Oh, yes.
Sir, good evening. My question is relating to the reduction of emission of greenhouse gas, by with a joint exploration by India and Australia. So what could be the way forward, sir, if we just could elucidate a little bit? Thank you.
Well, I mean, there is, and many thanks for this question, because I think, reduction of greenhouse gases.
Like to get a better context from him?
Yeah, maybe you can tell me why.
If you can give a better context to him to address, what you are doing and what you're thinking and what are the problems.
Global warming, actually. That what could be the way forward, because the an explorations was I think workshop was already held in September this year. So based on that particular workshop, what could be the way forward and take care, actually, at least for India especially?
So is this part of your business interest?
No, sir.
No, just a general question.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. So I the way forward is still under discussion. I mean, I've been working closely with the Energy Research Institute of India, KERI, and so I think the policy paper in terms of the way forward is still under discussion by research organizations. I was told that the first draft would be available by the end of this year, but I anticipate it could take at least till the first quarter. But there would be further discussions, because it is a huge challenge. It is a huge challenge. And not only that, there are other challenges. I mean, I've come from Delhi, and I can tell you that when you put your air purifier in Delhi, it starts with 510 in the house. 510. So I think a lot of this would need, everyone felt that the whole idea is that, the burnings that are taking place in Punjab are the main cause, but they are not. Many other people felt it was firecrackers in Diwali, but it is not. People are now saying that it is pollution from the cars, but the car manufacturing companies are saying it is not. So I think a policy intervention will come up. Whether it will come up before the elections or not, I don't know. It's not for me to say on that. But it is a matter of significant strategic concern, because it's also going to make business, industry, tourists, and everyone else pretty shy of coming to India, or at least certain parts of India.
Thank you. Yes.
It's a little general as well as a specific question. So we want to know more about collaborations in the fisheries sector. So fisheries, yeah. So Australia is a very successful country, both in marine trawling as well as in aquaculture. So can your institute or your India-Australia Institute or any of these chambers of commerce, can you offline guide me? Thank you.
Yeah, most certainly. Fisheries sector is of critical interest to Australia. They invest a lot of money in that. There is a current rethinking going on in the Australian government. They're looking at a legislation which may come as to whether Australians are overfishing, because you could actually go to Sydney and put your thing down and wait for your wife is ordering lunch, and you decide with a fishing rod to sit. Just literally, I'm not talking. I'm not joking. 30 yards away, you can fish. Today, it's not available. And today, what is available is polluted. You should not eat it. And the Australians have written over there, please do not fish, but please return the fish back into the water, not fit for human consumption. Right? Now, if you take the Pacific Island countries, they are also overfishing. Right? Now, in fishing, is there a possibility of collaboration? I believe so. However, there are a series of regulations that the Australians have put in terms of what kind of net to be used, when can you fish, what can you not fish. And naturally, there are these SPS and TBT regulations kick in, the entire sanitary and phytosanitary standards of the fish that's available. And therefore, we have not been exporting fish from here, though we do export prawns. Yeah, but we export prawns. We are exporting mussel. We are exporting a certain quantum of clams, squids. We are exporting from here. So, I mean, can that increase? Most certainly. But because of the SPS regulations, I think a lot of it is being held back for some time. But it simply requires upgradation of our own quarantine and, cleaning and hygienic standards and packaging standards. And of course, with packaging comes labeling and, all those other related issues. But can we connect you? Yes. But I'll do so personally. Along with Shorboji. I think Shorboji and myself will discuss with Sir and with other board members as to what a list of items that you want assistance in, and we can match make.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now, Mr. Vikram Tatia, Chairman of our Global Trade Subcommittee, would like to ask you a question.
Ambassador, one just quick, just a suggestion. When we were sitting in the president's room, we were talking a little bit on the higher education, and we suggested that just like the American and UK colleges have their universities fairs here held in Kolkata, this opportunity should be also tested by the American, Australian universities and colleges as well. Now, I'm associated with Rotary, and you see, through Rotary, we are associated through my particular club is close to 3 of the top schools in Kolkata, all English medium and all up to the grade 12. Now, most of the students here in Kolkata, I mean, very few look at Australia as an option for undergrad or higher studies. Even those who are, the consultants here, their prime focus is always first the US, then UK, you have Canada and Singapore. Somehow Australia doesn't feature that strongly. So we could help you to introduce you to these schools who are very well known and connected with us. If the colleges and universities are willing to come down to Kolkata and have a trade, exhibition here.
Vikramji, I must say that today is my lucky day, purely because I have attending this meeting today a young colleague from the India team, Miss Ayushi Pandey, who's sitting there and actually lives in Kolkata. And so when I say India team, this is the India student recruitment team. But even if she doesn't recruit, the whole idea of speaking to a student, it's very nice if the student decides to study in Australia, and even nicer if she or he were to study at UNSW. But more importantly, engagement. So might I propose for your consideration 2 things. One is that I will work it out with Ayushi so that there is a very strong, she will connect with you, and that a very strong presentation can be made with the India team in each of the schools, or an event organized by Rotary for all the Rotary school members, their children, on what exactly studying in Australia means. I will request the Australian Consul General to get into this. I will be able to connect you with the immigration authorities so that they know the pathway process. And studying at UNSW, what are the benefits? We are 19th in the world. We have among the highest in the world employability quotients. 98% of our students get a job before they complete their undergraduation. The remaining 2% get a job on the day they complete their graduation. We are a very strong university, and an excellent point that you have made is, why are we not doing an education fair in Kolkata? I think I will leave it to Ayushi to just say what she would like to add to this.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you. So I completely understand your question. So what happened was I did my BBA here from JDBI. And just like my friends, I wanted to go out and explore, have an international exposure. And following their footsteps, I could see only 2 countries. One is UK and second was the States. And my mom was forcing me to go to Canada because I have my first cousins over there. Australia was nowhere in the picture. I did not have anyone, nor it has publicized themselves a lot in terms of education sector in this city. I dropped the option for UK because it just was a 10-month course, and every 2 years the policy was changing, and I was not very confident of going there. Canada just looked like a migration country for me, so it was not working for me. I was taking all the decisions all alone, and when my father saw that it's taking a toll on my health, we went to this agency. They helped us. Okay, Australia can be a place for you. It's a great country where students can work and study together, nice lifestyle. And when I saw the university, the ranking was equal to the best of the universities in the UK. The game changed within an hour. I applied, and within 2 months, I was in Sydney, UNSW. Again, when I was applying, there were top 8 universities. I narrowed down between the cities, which one will work for me. I was more of a beach person, and I thought Sydney will give me more of an international exposure because I did my homework. I saw Melbourne, there are more of the local citizens rather than international students. Probably I'll walk over there and then move to Melbourne. That was the plan. But I started with Sydney. After me, 5 more students came in from my university, seeing that I'm well adjusted, doing well over there. So I think it's just a word of mouth, and then we can work out better. Definitely, Calcutta is a place where I have just moved in again back from Delhi, And I would love to work with Professor Zian with the Bharat Chamber, where we can expose a little bit more about Australian education.
Thank you. Yes.
Your Excellency, it's a coincidence that I grew up in a Australian Methodist school, boarding school here. And it's a coincidence that I have a lot of friends when we were in a boarding, so both Indians and Australians. But what comes to our discussion, I find is there are scope for a lot of vegetables to go from here. I think it's somewhere missing, but somehow we as a country we are rich in the eastern side. Perhaps something can be worked on to make this some vegetable thing. I mean, there are parameters of international standards. We don't have the infrastructure, but then I am from the packaging industry. This is what I am working with, the improvement of packaging of the agriculture sector here. So perhaps your team can also look, as you're saying, the various opportunities. Because my friends, they say they don't get that vegetables. If whether that's possible, because today Holland is running on an economy based on agriculture, and we have the green belt as we were taught in school, but we don't have any export.
You know, sir, firstly, my humble request to all of you, my name is Amit. Please do not call me Excellency or, that's not the name that my parents gave me. My parents gave me the name Amit, so please call me Amit. Number one. Number two, you have said something to me just now, which really touches my heart. I go to Sydney for 3 months every year, purely to do grandparenting. You know, my granddaughter is going to be 2 years old. And even when I was consul general and I used to go to the markets, you could get every possible Chinese vegetable, including the Chinese Karela. And they would come in fresh. Fresh. I'm not saying frozen. You can get Karela in Indian Karela in Sydney, but it comes in frozen packets. Right? Now, is there a market and a demand for this? Things like shalgom, for example, the Chinese also grow it. So you get it. Lao, what's it called? Bottle gourd. So bottle gourd you can find because it's Chinese. Now, I think if you did a market survey first, in terms of which vegetables are already available, because a tried and tested pipeline by the Chinese has already been laid down on some of the vegetables that you would otherwise be sending, and find which are the new ones that you can send. There is a huge market available. You know, I like eating cabbage. Basically, the Bengali Badakobi Shobji with potatoes and motorshuti. You cannot eat Australian cabbage under any circumstances because it is about this size. You know, I'm not joking. To lift it itself requires some physical prowess. So I think a quick visit, or alternatively, I can, send you photographs. When I'm there, I'm going to be there middle of January. So I think, is there an opportunity? Yes, but naturally, any product has to have a buyer. Otherwise, it's not worth your while. So you need to be able to create that. Now, one of the programs I brought into India was MasterChef Australia. Now, that was brought during my tenure and on my recommendation. There are vegetables in India that no Australian has ever seen. They don't know how to deal with it, right? You have to first create that this is what you can do with drumsticks. I mean, people don't know what it is, right? So I would say, yes, there is a market, provided you cultivate it. Because the Australians are extremely fond of Indian food, and they are very open people. Very open people.
Thank you for this valuable feedback. I would now, of course, Amit, co-chairman of our Global Trade Subcommittee, of course. Last question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I should
Take this. Huh?
So I'll call you Amit Da.
Amit
Amit to
and
Amit.
Amita.
So congratulate you on a very insightful speech which you gave, and a lot of things that we did
আপনার
not.
মাইকটা অন নেই অন আমি তো শুনতে পাচ্ছি বাট
Light is on. Hello.
আচ্ছা ওকে
But, hello. So our company is basically engaged in international trade of iron ore, ferroalloys, and coal. So I just wanted to get an insight about Australian industry in the raw material sector, where I see that they are not interested in value addition in most of the raw material, and they are basically exporting as it is. So I want to understand why is this policy is being followed, and is there any plan that they will expand into setting up the plants so that in the future these raw material will be consumed locally rather than being exported?
You see, they are not interested in manufacturing within Australia purely because they don't have the labor power to do that. They don't have it. And most Australian employment is essentially in the service sector. As you would know, Australia has phased out the only car it manufactured, which is among the best cars. It phased it out. It said that, so they operate on a very simple basis that if I were to manufacture a car, how much would it cost me as opposed to my importing a car? And if I levy significant amount of, let's say, add-ons onto that car that you can't do this, it has to do this, etc., then will I earn sufficiently enough to be able to manage on my own? So there's a very little bit of value add also that they go into. But if you held conversations and discussions with them, I think, it is possible to able to navigate some of these. Do you know Motherson? Huh.
Basically a Japanese company.
No, it's owned by an Indian origin person.
Yeah, that's a
But it's owned by an Indian origin person who lives currently in Dubai. And so they will have many offices. One of their main head offices in India is actually in Delhi, in Noida. And so I have extensively met with them, discussed with them. So they are the kind of people who might be happy to do this kind of acquisition, purchase, and would be good people to consult with. They have a huge presence in Australia, a huge presence. So I think what one needs to do is to look carefully at one's own product and then ask, how do I push it into the Australian market? Is there resonance there? And so as and when, sir and all of you decide to visit, then the people that you meet, it is to be able to clarify the thinking in your mind, because you're talking with a counterpart. I'm not a counterpart. The counterpart is the person who's actually going to buy or co-produce with you or co-sell or whatever it is, access the facility. So I think my gut feeling would be, though I need to read a little bit more and check a little bit more, that they are not closed-minded on iron ore, but it is not in their list of priorities. And they are selling to us. They are selling iron ore to us. We are one of the importers of iron ore from Australia.
not iron ore, but coal.
Coal also.
India is exporting iron ore.
Yeah, but there is a certain quantum of iron ore also that we are importing, and this I will tell you from which company also.
That is news to me.
I mean, a very small percentage, but the fact is, why are we importing? I don't know.
Maybe because of trade, some type of trade.
No, it could have also been because of a legacy issue. Sometimes, legacy is difficult to get rid of. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Like all good things, this session also needs to come to an end now. And I would now, before I request our Vice President for delivering a vote of thanks, a small memento for you, sir. Yeah. Something for your desk with your.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Ambassador Dasgupta, Her Excellency Miss Rowan Ainsworth, in absentia, Ambassadors Chakravarti, Shitatia, members of the chamber, guests and friends. At the end of a very important special session on trade and investment prospects between India and Australia, Oceania, it is my most pleasant duty to propose a very hearty vote of thanks to our guest-in-chief, Ambassador Amit Dasgupta, AMIFS retired, Distinguished Fellow, Australia-India Institute. Thank you, sir, for your kindly sparing some of your valuable time in addressing the members of our chamber today. The robust economic performance of India amid the global headwinds has enabled us to earn the reputation of being considered amongst the most stable economies and vibrant consumer market globally. In this context, the volume of bilateral trade between India and Australia are scaling new heights. However, the significance of island countries in Oceania often gets overlooked despite their close proximity to Australia. Ambassador Dasgupta's enlightening address has opened a new horizon and would definitely change the perspective with which we have observed Oceania so far. Thank you, sir, once again for your address. My special thanks are due to our respected committee members, Ambassador Sarvajit Chakravarti, for being instrumental in organizing today's session. I would also like to thank Sri Vikram Tatia, Chairman, Global Trade Subcommittee, for his kind presence at this session. With these words, I would request all of you to join me in carrying a hearty vote of thanks to our honored guest-in-chief, Ambassador Amit Dasgupta, with appreciative acclamation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very kind.